Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tonkin Legal Group, home of the Australian Family Law Podcast, the AFLP. Definitely not the official podcast of the Australian Football League. It is I, as always, your host, Joe Charbine. Only got Charlie for now. No SH, no St. John tonight, but mate, we're in for a special treat today, aren't we, Charlie?
We are in for a treat. Just the two of us today, Joe. So looking forward to it. The dynamic duo. With all due respect to SH, no, we miss him. We miss him. Um, so the weekend that has gone in footy. Now a lot has obviously transpired since then, but it'd probably be remiss if we didn't quickly touch on the great late Neil Danaher. Passed away yesterday. So yeah, obviously a very sad day for his family and for the footy world for the work that he did for MND and the broader community.
Absolutely. And for our two clubs, obviously, his playing days at the Bombrays and then coaching with you guys, so at the Demons. So
Yep,
he's got a special place in both of our teams' hearts. And,
yep,
with the whole fight against motor neurone disease, fighting against the beast, with the
yep.
big freeze games now that will continue on. And it just goes to show that, he didn't win Australian of the Year for nothing. It was, of course, an admirable thing that he's done, and he will forever be cherished and remembered by everybody in the footy landscape.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And like you said, he's a D's and a Bombers legend. So an icon of our two clubs.
Indeed, and such is life. In the words of the great Brad Scott, we're all going to die one day. And we're just going to make sure that we cherish every moment we got and not take anything for granted. Isn't that right, Brad? So yeah, so Brad's gone. Brad's been shown the door. He's been sacked. And someone who is even happier than I am. It's Elijah Sardis. Elijah Sardis. He's
He'll
back.
get a game. He's going to get a game now that Brad's
He,
gone.
he's going to get more than one game, I would imagine, especially this week. So big news reverberating through the footy landscape that Brad Scott has been let go effective immediately. Massive news. Obviously, I just can't stop smiling. I haven't been able to stop smiling all day, which is so
Oh
bad. It's
yeah.
so bad of me. I apologize.
No, it's. I mean, you're always incredibly happy, Joe. One of the happiest people I know. But I think today more so than ever, I don't think you've stopped smiling since the news of Brad Scott's sacking has been made public. So happy for you. Happy you're happy. Now, who's going to replace him? Do we want Hurdy or what's the
Oh,
go?
nah, I just want to process. I want to process. There's so many ready candidates out there who are itching to coach for the first time. We've discussed this multiple times, you and I. I really hope this is the
Yep.
last time we do a podcast in light of a coach getting sacked, because this is just ridiculous.
Yep.
Football, please give us something different to talk about. But like,
Yep.
I'd love, Kelly at a Geelong with
Yep.
Longmire as a director of coaching. I think that would be wonderful. And just Brad's gone. Well, you got to
Yep.
let go of all the assistant coaches with him as well and
Yep.
replace him with maybe a Sean Grigg, for example. Love
Yep.
Sean Grigg. Enright, love Enright. So there's heaps of,
Yep.
maybe a Herd, if he was there to come as an assistant coach, but it could cause some mayhem, I think, with the spectre of James Hurd reaching over everyone's shoulders. But
Yep.
ultimately, it's all going to come down to what can be negotiated, right?
It is. It is. And as you said, I think the coaches and unfortunately the sacking of coaches has given us a fair bit of content this season unexpectedly. So you're right. I think they need to go through the process. Do some negotiations. I mean, there might be some negotiations that might need to be done with Brad and his contract situation. I mean, he was it one more year that he was contracted
Yeah,
for?
27.
2020, end of 2027. So yeah, there might be some need for a bit of negotiating or mediating between Brad's team and the Bombers.
Yeah, how long are we going to be splitting up this payment. Obviously, it's going to eat into the soft cap, and soft cap something that we are really going to need if we're going to be overturning the entire coaching panel. But that's why today it's also going to be a very special episode, as you guys might have could tell from the title of this episode. We have got a special guest, Patricia, who is, of course, an accredited family dispute resolution specialist from Families in Practice. So she's going to be joining us very shortly to discuss the ins and outs of what a mediation involves, and we'll be asking, I think, some very common questions that a lot of people tend to present to us, those who have never been through the system before, never had a mediation, never had a split, and it's going to hopefully be a really fruitful conversation with her.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Great. So let us bring her on.
Let's do it. All right. So we've spoken a lot on the podcast about the benefits of mediation and family dispute resolution. And today, as you can see, we're now joined by someone who's on the front line in these types of services. So we've got Patricia Coghill of Families in Practice. Patricia, good to have you.
Hi, hello.
So Patricia is an accredited mediator and a family dispute resolution practitioner. And she's kindly agreed to join us today to speak a bit more about her work and how she can assist parties who might be going through a separation, whether it be a property dispute or a parenting matter. But before we do delve into that space, Patricia, we've got an initial crucial question for you.
Sure.
Which AFL team do you support?
Look, I don't follow the footy, but I feel for the purposes of this, I need to. So can you guys give me some kind of guidance as to who I should be saying right now?
Well, you've got the option of Joe's team, Essendon, who this morning they just sacked their coach.
Okay.
Or my team, Melbourne, who we sacked their coach last year. So
I think Essendon is the one in the family, so I'm
Sure.
going to have to go with Joe's preferred team. Sorry, Charlie.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. All right. Well, Patricia, did you want to start by maybe telling us a bit about your background and what drew you into the family law area in the first place?
Yeah. So I guess my background started off, wanting to do law since high school. When people ask me this, I always say I wanted to be like a detective or a cop and do all those fun things. So I always thought still get some kind of degree. And then, I moved into criminal justice diploma initially because my uni and score or whatever it's called these days was not nearly enough for law. And I worked in that space. I mean, with criminal justice at RMIT, it's really like community based. So it was, working with offenders and, parole boards and things like that. So that's kind of where I started in that criminal law kind of area. And then went on from there to do my degree in social science at RMIT, which I guess did incorporate more of those legal law heavy theoretical subjects. And that was finished quite quickly because I had done the diploma there. So they're like, go away, essentially. And then after that, I was kind of like, it's time to do my law degree. Now I think I want to be a lawyer. And then did that. It took ages. So as a mature age student, and I did that online. And then I got admitted around COVID, which kind of threw a spanner in the works. And I guess everything was weird and during that time. So I made the shift into IVF, but I had always worked in family law up until that point. I always say IVF is not that different to family law. It's still families and negotiating, which probably sounds horrible in the scheme of IVF, but negotiating with people what kind of babies they want and what's important to them. And then from there, I was kind of in two minds about whether I move back into the legal field or am I staying IVF. I was working the donor and surrogacy team, so that had its own like legislation, and I was really happy there. But I always find patients from that field and family law clients were very similar, just heightened, stressed. I
Yeah.
feel like no one knows what to do when you're in that situation for the first time, and a lot of people are only in it for the first time. And then I got the opportunity to start family dispute resolution. I think that's kind of when it was slowly becoming more mandatory, that
Yeah.
it was becoming needed. And I did that course. I don't think it took too long, but it was a really interesting way of viewing what the family law kind of industry was like at that point in time, particularly because there's a really heavy emphasis on people to negotiate, stay out of court, you know, if you can. And I guess back from when I was working in law firms, there was a big push on being litigious, and kind of lawyers taking over from their clients. You know, I always say lawyers know best, but there was a real push at that point in time. Mediators, we need more mediators. And I always say there was a lot of people at that point in time who were very old as mediators. So I wanted to kind of bring something, you know, from my own experience and someone, you know, with a young child at the time, and saying, what can I bring into this that's different?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's and
Thank
it's
you.
definitely no, not at all. Genuinely heartfelt. I can't imagine what it's like having a child and then having to then sort of be in between maybe two parents who are trying to just, you know, having a bit of a dispute or to negotiate about their own children. And it's amazing. I can't imagine, you know, being able to separate myself from the situation, not imagine myself in their shoes. But, you know, obviously as an accredited, you know, specialist in having done this for a period of time now, and running your own, I suppose, you know, running families in practice, what would it look like for someone to, you know, oh, I've got a dispute, I need to negotiate with my partner. How would they go about doing that?
I guess in terms of, you know, the process initially, I feel like at the moment it's where we're seeing a lot of maybe influx from lawyers saying do mediation. And I feel like when a lot of clients are referred that come from lawyers, I say they are generally the best type of clients because they are very well aware of the process and why they need to do it. Obviously, when I have clients that are either for some weird reason don't want to speak to a lawyer, you know, I push really hard on that. But it's kind of up to then describe to them, well, this is the process. And that generally starts from, you know, me meeting individually with the parties, trying to suss out what's going on for them. We do a family violence assessment to make sure that, you know, everyone would be safe to do mediation, that it's relevant. I mean, I've referred a few clients out where I felt like you need legal advice or this is not something I can help you with. Either if it's just a financial or property matter that you don't need to do mediation, or you know, in, I guess I want to say in circumstances where there's a family violence safety risk. I haven't hit those yet where I don't think mediation would be suitable. But then pretty much, I guess, there's a lot of preparation depending on the type of matter that you end up getting to the mediation stage. So that can be through lawyers where people are doing discovery, or I guess through parenting matters. I always say, look, parents know their kids best, and I would hope they do. So, you know, at that point in time, I'm not too concerned in terms of you're entitled to 50-50 or whatever. You know, this really is heavily dependent on the child and children that are involved. And I think that really is something I work on with the parties directly. So, yeah, I guess it really does depend on the process, how it goes, on whether it's parenting or property financials, and kind of that's how we determine the way it goes.
And speaking on the parenting side of things, Patricia, for the mediations, I know you do both child inclusive mediation as well as a more general family mediation. Would you be able to tell us just a bit about the differences between those different types?
Yeah, so I always say with child inclusive, it's something that needs to be done very carefully. I have been qualified to do them. I have so far not done one, and I think a lot of the times I have refused. It's something that, in terms of child inclusive, the child is involved in the process. It is a separate session that they do, and it's generally just one session where they meet with the mediator. And I always say it's very age appropriate, but kind of getting an idea as to what their feelings are around what's happening. They can, I guess, provide some kind of feedback as to what they feel would work for them at that point in time. And then it gets relayed to the parents as general feedback, and in a way that's, I guess, still confidential and keeping that, confidentiality with the child. Both parents need to consent to that. I guess the reason why I feel like it needs to be treaded on very carefully is that my concern is, I guess it's not very regulated in comparison to like a family law report in court. So I guess we would need to consider any external influences on the child before they met with a mediator, which as a mediator you can't control. And then generally, if it's obviously a non-child inclusive mediation, that's with both parties, generally mum and dad, either with their lawyers on the day or without lawyers. They can be in separate rooms as well, and I just go between the rooms to facilitate a negotiation, a discussion between them, and hope to get an agreement on the day.
Because, whilst it might not be as rigidly structured, for example, as you mentioned, as if it was being done, through a formal and court-appointed, expert for the purposes of a report, the flexibility though is still handy because the parties are in full control of their negotiations with your assistance, of course, as the mediator going in between the rooms. And because as a barrister I've spoken to, really when it comes to mediation, the only thing stopping you from settling is your imagination. You're just limited by imagination in there. So so the flexibility to try and obviously, without prejudice, negotiations to try and settle the matter should certainly be everyone's first point of call, I think.
Yeah, and I think particularly with a child inclusive type situation, you would need both parents to be, I guess, amicable to some extent and really are wanting to listen to what the feedback is from their child and are willing to implement it, whether if it falls in their favor or not. And, unfortunately, that is something that you don't commonly come across. But in the very off instance that you would, it would be beneficial, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I guess you're dealing with parties and clients who are going through severe stress and very heightened emotions. I know I've spoken with a lot of clients, Patricia, who have worked with you and have had very high praise for your work.
Thank you.
Do you often work with lawyers, or are lawyers often involved in your practice as a dispute resolution practitioner? Or
it's funny you say that, or you ask that, because I initially, when I started my practice, I was very much of the fact I do not want to have lawyers involved in what I do. Obviously, I'm trying to move away from that and particularly work with people that do not want to get lawyers involved. And then, slowly getting into a few lawyer-assisted mediations, I have found the benefit of having lawyers there, but even just having a lawyer in the background during the mediation process to say to their clients, they might have a range that they come in for a property settlement. I know I'm entitled to X amount. My lawyer said not to go down from that. And it's a good, I guess, spot for me to work with. And I think that's really helpful. Whereas I still feel, I guess, well, not still, but I definitely now am very much, you need a lawyer. I will not do a mediation unless you have seen someone. So you need to go and see someone. And I think I definitely would say about 95% of the people I see either have lawyers or have gotten some initial advice during that mediation process. So I would say most of my matters now, I need to have lawyers involved. It just makes it easier. It makes it safer as well, if any concerns arise. And it just really lets the clients negotiate what they know that they can
Yeah.
negotiate on and what they're entitled to.
Yeah.
And how often do you reckon you would say, given the number of people who go and get their
Yeah.
legal advice beforehand,
Yes.
or have their lawyer there, how often would you say that matters are settling as a result of these mediations?
I would say the one or two where that don't settle are generally the ones where it's still not a bad time to be doing mediation, but when it's very initial stages of, I guess, talking about, we're not even talking about a settlement, we're maybe talking about discovery, or what are interim parenting arrangements, or what are interim financial arrangements, who pays a mortgage, things like that. But I guess there is a real combined knowledge, even the parties know, the lawyers know, this isn't going to get anywhere long term today. But I always think those are still really good, because I get the lawyers to come out and talk to each other and say, where's your client at? What's this? And generally in those particular sessions, the parties and their lawyers will come back for a second session. And that's when I'm like, okay, we are only doing a second session if we're ready to make a settlement. But it's a good starting point. But otherwise, yeah, I feel as though the mediations are lawyer assisted, we're ready for a settlement, or in that really initial stage. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And would you have any other, I guess, tips, Patricia, for a client who might be on the fence or kind of a bit hesitant to go into a mediation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm the worst person to ask that, because I deal with quite a few people that are like, why do I have to do this? And in my brain, I'm just like, you have to. Like, what do you
Just do it.
Literally. So
Yeah.
I guess in terms of on the fence, it would be why. Is this a cost concern? Is it because the agreements you reach at mediation aren't legally binding? And I'm always now really reinforcing that aspect of sit down for a day with me, get it done in the day, and then you take it to your lawyer. And you do conserve the fees, and they can advise you on what you've reached. So I guess it's really finding out why people are on the fence. I've heard, I guess, from some clients with other providers, they might say, it's free. What's different from paying you and going to someone who does it for free? And I guess on the fence is very much, do you want to do this once, or do you want to do it a few times when the agreement you make in some other places might not be relevant for a longer period of time? Also, I guess quality of care as well. I like to check in with my clients after mediation, see how they're doing. That's when I might say, do you want to come back, go and speak to your lawyer, proceed the way that they tell you best. So on the fence, I think it would really be about why. But it's common. I do get a lot of initial inquiries, and some people are just like, I need to do this in 2 weeks. Okay. But then it's like, oh, no. And it could be things like, I haven't spoken to a mortgage broker, we're going to sell the house, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you need to do that. It's part of the process.
It's very different to waiting, for example, at Relationships Australia, for example. There's these government subsidized bodies have tremendously long waiting times, and
absolutely,
all right, fine, it's free or cheap or even
sure,
cheaper, but time is money, and if you can get a much shorter turnaround with someone like you, for example, at Families in Practice, could be quicker to, for example, get a resolution to your matter.
And it's just, I guess their workload, whereas it's so jam-packed, they need to, I don't know how many mediations they do in a day, but when the time comes and they need a second second parties or session, you've got to go, you've got to leave. Whereas I guess I dedicate a whole day to a whole mediation. I don't do half days, and I think that's because we really utilize the time. And that's why I think it's also things in terms of how mediation agreements are being drafted at the moment. Some people might have had a bad experience and say it was just written in dot points or something like that. It doesn't account for things that are coming up now. And that's when I'm kind of like, whoa, what went wrong? And I need to make sure that you don't have the same experience with me, to make this worth your while.
I think that's an important thing, especially that you do a full day mediation and it's not staggered at a couple of hours here and come back in a week's time, because I assume you would be gathering momentum in the full day sessions a lot of the time, and hopefully that's more conducive to the parties reaching an agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I get hesitant when lawyers call and ask, "What's your fee for a half day?" And I'm like, I don't do them. And I can understand from a cost perspective for the clients, but also if it's so in the initial stages that the lawyers need a few hours to figure out where are we going from here, what's going on. But if that's the case, I'm like, okay, well, what's in the interim? What can we talk about? Can we get a parenting plan down, or who's paying for this, or who's paying for that? Let's, do we need to value the property? What are some other agreements we can come to? And you really utilize that whole day. I had a mediation a few weeks ago, and what I had heard from the mum was that she's like, I have a lot of clarity now. And I was like, that's great. You now know what you need to do. And I think sometimes when you are working with just your lawyer, you can only advise your client so much. You can't control what the other party's doing or what the other lawyer's doing. So I think really having both parties there gives everyone an idea of, okay, I know how this is going to go and where it needs to go. Yeah.
Well, Patricia, honestly, just like your full day mediations, we could sit and talk with you about this topic all day as well. But I think we're very thankful for the time that you've given us and all of our viewers today for shedding some light about, how you work in families and practice and what people can sort of look forward to and anticipate and the benefits of family dispute resolution. So thank you so much, Patricia, for your time. We will, of course, leave all of your details, your practices details in the blurb, the description of this video down below. So if you guys are out there that want to get a mediation and want to reach out to Patricia's office, you can find those details and let her know that the AFLP, the Tonkin Legal Group, sent you there. She'll make sure to look after you, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Patricia. We really appreciate your insights. I think it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. If you guys like what you had to see or hear from us today, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to not miss out on any of our episodes as they come out. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, please rate us 5 stars. It greatly helps with our outreach to continue to demystify family law for practitioners and non-practitioners alike. As always, it's been your boys, Joe and Charlie, joined by Patricia today, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next one.
See you next time.
Thank you.